We've reached the Terran fortress. They're dug in and ready for us. I need the swarm.
Queen of Blades, morph Zerglings very fast.
We need a huge swarm of Zerglings.
They are the ultimate weapon of the final war.
Why must we limit ourselves? Morph swarm host from the larva at our hatchery.
Kill her.
Marines Only was pretty rough in places, but was absolutely possible, so Zerglings Only should be pretty easy, right? The rules are simple. Only units I can attack or defend with are Zerglings. This includes no fighting with Kerrigan, though she is allowed to do non-combat things such as picking up objectives. The Zerglings Only rule does not apply to my AI allies because of course not. I play on the brutal difficulty, I can use abilities to transport my Zerglings around if needed, and I can use spore crawlers to defend my bases against air units, but they cannot be used offensively. If there are air units in the middle of the map harassing me, I just have to live with it. With that being said, this is a long video, so let's get into the run. The beginning of Heart of the Swarm is where Zerglings thrive. In Labrat, they're the only combat unit available, and there's absolutely no reason to ever pull your drones to attack the enemy. Mission number 2 is Back in the Saddle, and it's the first of 4 no-build missions in Heart of the Swarm. All of these missions are not available with Zerglings Only because they don't give you any Zerglings to use. Rendezvous is where the run really starts. I'm given 4 Zerglings, a spore crawler, and a handful of drones. Kerrigan and the Spines have to head to the back of the base. There are 5 allied buildings near my base that spawn broodlings when killed. They're not mine, so they're fair game, but they don't do much. At the 1 minute mark, the first enemy attack hits, 10 Marines. Normally, Kerrigan's crushing grip trivializes these waves. Instead, they cleave through my defensive lings. I lose basically everything. And a minute later, the second wave comes. And I'm already dead. This is going to need some planning. The difficulty here is that I need to get my economy going quickly, but I also have to deal with the enemy's rapid attack waves. I have to get creative to do both. I end up deciding that fighting straight up is not viable. I have to lay a trap instead. I split my Zerglings and take 3 of the 4 allied structures down to low HP. Once the Marines move in, I destroy them. The broodlings then weaken the enemies to the point that I can clean them up. Unfortunately, these structures are a one-time deal. When the next attack wave shows up, I let them hit my hatchery for a while I build up a larger Zergling force. Once I have a fairly large group, I manage to clean things up fairly decently. Great! I've made it to the 3-minute mark. Only 12 minutes remain. The Terran continue their attacks, but with a more complicated army. The Marauders have an area of effect ability that slows all of my Zergling, and medics provide healing at a very rapid rate. From now on, I employ burrow tactics to engage. I continue with these ambushes for the next 10 minutes. I never manage to get a huge army, but I'm able to survive. But why are these attack waves so strong? Small groups of Marines or Goliaths should not be a threat against mass Zergling, right? What's going on? If you've ever misjudged a fight in Heart of the Swarm, it might not be your fault. During testing for this run, my friend Rhyme discovered something very interesting. On the brutal difficulty, there's a hidden modifier that increases all damage done to your units by 25%. I couldn't find any official documentation of this anywhere, but once I tested it, it's obviously true. This changes Zergling math drastically. For example, the Hellbat now deals 37 damage in a cone, changing it from killing lings in 2 shots to 1. Also, the splash damage from siege tanks now kills Zerglings in an area instead of just the main target. Because of this, I went into the run believing the later stages of the campaign would be legitimately impossible. After defending these souped up attack waves, the timer expires and part 2 begins. Nidus worms erupt from the ground and deliver troops into battle, which is really annoying because I have to act quickly to burrow my queens so they don't do anything in the fight. Once I have a large enough force, I move to the objective. There's no way that I could kill the enemy base, so I dive the pulse cannon. My unit count was barely enough and the objective dies. This was only mission 3 and I'm already struggling. Now I have to decide between going to Kaldir or Char, and the choice is an easy one. Kaldir is universally agreed to be the easiest planet by far, and Char is a miserable slog that will be much more simple once I get my Zergling Evolution, is what I would like to say. Right now, all of Kaldir is possible with the Zerglings Only, with the exception of the initial no-build segment at the very beginning. At first I thought killing the Urston Matriarch was not possible without either doing damage or tanking with something else, until I realized that if I were to clear Char, then unlock and clear Xeris, I could do it. So I have to go to Char. Great. Domination sucks. Normally I'm supposed to capture eggs with Kerrigan and then roll through Zagara's fortress of a base with hundreds of free Baneling. But before I can even think about attacking Zagara, I have to defend against her. Zagara herself is pretty good against Zerglings, sporting a large amount of armor and HP to tank, while being a detector so I can't ambush her with Burrow. She responds quickly and puts the pressure on constantly, taxing my Zergling count the entire time. In order to win this mission, I have to have a strong economy, so I grab my expansion. After saturating both my bases and grabbing some macro hatcheries, I pump lings hard and start clearing the map. Before starting Domination, I got to select the mutator for my Zerglings. My choices were between movement speed, attack speed, and HP. Initially, I had planned on swapping between mutations as the occasion demanded, but as time went on, it became painfully obvious that the only viable mutator was attack speed. The others meant that even maxed out armies didn't have the firepower to eat through bulkier enemies. The egg objective gives mostly Banelings, but it does give me 50 supply of Zerglings as well. I have to clear the map. After maxing out, I grab the last egg and pop up to 240 supply. It's worth mentioning that I'm mined out of the map, meaning that this is all that I'm gonna get. 426 Zerglings is a lot. They managed to wash over the ground portion of Zagara's base easily. Individual Ultralisks get upwards of 40 kills, but that's not enough to stop them. Zagara has over 20 Mutalisks in her base, making a war of attrition impossible. In order to win, every tech and production structure has to be killed. The Mutalisks grind down my forces, and after Zagara's final hive falls, my entire Zergling force is dead. Thank goodness it was the final structure, otherwise I would have been in real trouble. Fire in the sky is not the sort of mission I want to see while doing this run. Zergling work best in a high economy scenario with multiple bases, where hundreds can be used to break through enemy lines. Here I have a single base to work off of. The objective is straightforward. Spread creep to all of the Scourge Nest buildings around the map to destroy 7 Gorgon battlecruisers. The battlecruisers are invulnerable without the Scourge Nests, so there's no getting around this objective. The kicker is that I have a single creep tumor to work with. If the tumor dies, I die. Without any bases to claim, I decide that controlling the map is effectively worthless. I allow the first few Gorgon battlecruisers to get dangerously close to my base before blowing them up. There's a Terran outpost to the south of me. During this mission, it sends multiple attack waves against my main. Knocking it out is often a good idea. After getting about 60 lings, I give it a go. And the fight is a slaughter. Not in the good way. The fight is so one-sided against me that I consider resetting, but I'm a stubborn idiot, so I keep going. I rebuild and wait for them to attack me this time. After cleaning it up, I turn on the aggression. My Zergling wave washes over the Terran defenders, claiming the 4th and 5th Scourge Nests easily. After burrow ambushing another attack wave, it's time for the last leg of the map. I had intended to keep the momentum going, but 4 of my 8 mineral fields are already gone. My Zergling production falls to a trickle. My last hurrah of Zerglings manages to break through the enemy defenses right as I mine out the map. It's really a shame there's a 7th objective left. As a last-ditch effort, I send my 8 final lings to the objective, and somehow the Goliaths and Thor to the left of me didn't notice. I slipped the creep tumor past the defenses and ninja capped the final objective. This was the second mission in a row where I had to mine out the entire map to win, but it was worth it. Now I have access to the Zergling Evolution mission, where I can grab one of 2 powerful permanent upgrades to the Zergling. Actually, I lied. I have access to 1 powerful upgrade and 1 misleading upgrade that's actually dumpster tier. Meet the Swarmling strain. They come with 2 upsides. Instead of hatching in pairs, the Swarmlings come in triplets for the same price. That's 50% more Zerglings. They also hatch almost instantly. So why would I give up 50% more Zerglings for free? Nowhere does it say this, but the extra Zergling is not truly free. While it doesn't cost minerals, it still costs supply. This means that a 200 supply army of Swarmlings is no more powerful than the armies I'm currently fielding. And I'm barely winning with those right now. As long as the Raptor strain has any increases to its combat potential, a maxed out Raptorling army will be far superior to a Swarmling army. And boy is the Raptor sweet. First off, the Raptor does 2 bonus damage, and more importantly, the Raptor leaps a short distance to their target. The ability is incredible for rapidly surrounding enemies. They also gain the ability to jump up cliffs, something I was incredibly excited to make awesome use of in this run, and then it basically never came up. Old Soldiers is a mission based entirely on tempo. The first segment, I'm normally given a ton of Banelings, Zerglings, and Kerrigan to do as much damage as possible in about 3 minutes. Suffering catastrophic losses attacking this wall was not exactly the tempo I was looking for. Not a great first showing for the Raptor Zergling. There are 2 Terran bases on the map that I can claim for minerals. Normally, the initial strike force is able to clear one out fairly easily and get some solid damage on the second. The enemy is entrenched with elite firebats healed by elite medics, with siege tanks shelling my forces from behind. In addition to the Raptor Zergling, I've unlocked a new passive ability, Zergling Reconstitution. While 10 Zerglings every 30 seconds isn't much in the later stages of the campaign or in high economy scenarios, it's great when I'm stuck on one base. Instead of going for a massive bust, I send small squads of Zergling to dive the firebats. The lings do moderate damage to them, but the siege tank splash vaporizes them. After whittling down the front line, I go for a bust. Now I have a second base to work with. The gold base is filled with a huge mech force that I need overwhelming numbers to engage. They also have a couple banshees to beat. This is really annoying because the rules clearly state that I can only use spore crawlers for defense. Fortunately for me, once the buildings are cleared, Zagara drops some drones in the area for me to take a base. I build some hatcheries and then move in a few spores to secure the area. The next few minutes consist of me running around wildly defending against the various attacks, drops, and nukes that Warfield sends. He's incredibly aggressive on this mission. After grabbing both bonus objectives, constructing 10 hatcheries, and getting thousands of minerals in the bank, it's time to crack Warfield. My first maxed army does okay. Much of his infrastructure does go down, but he rallies defense and I have to retreat. Normally the Wraith is a meme unit, but I can't justify defending this area with spore crawlers, so they're constantly wearing down my forces. With my huge production capacity, I quickly rebuild a maxed army and strike again. This wave breaches the inner chamber and does a number on the objective. However, I'm pushed back again, and I've mined out the entire map again. And this time, SCVs are repairing the objective. I'm really on the clock. I spend my remaining minerals and dive everything onto the objective, and manage to take it down. Char is really, really hard. Waking the Ancient is a nice, relaxing vacation after the brutality of Char, right? The map is designed with Mutalisk flight in mind. The terrain is cut up into valleys and hills, making normal ground movement pretty difficult. My cliff jumping ability is great here. The first part of the mission can be broken into two parts, stopping the enemies from harvesting meat and harvesting for myself. Stopping the enemies is easy. They always send ground forces to claim the meat. They're no match for my swarm. Claiming the meat, on the other hand, is horrible. The enemies send waves of Mutalisks and Guardians against me. My only option is to send all of my forces to the area, hold position, and watch my forces die as the drones collect the meat. Each harvest is costing me between 50 and 100 lings. There are many pre-placed defensive groups on the map. They're not that difficult to take out, but many of them have the Flying Guardian unit as well, meaning that moving around the map starts to cause me to hemorrhage units. The constant need to replenish my forces takes me so much time that I mine out the 4th map in a row. I return the final meat with 150 supply remaining. Thankfully, Brack is a pretty easy fight. Or so I thought. Brack has a huge splash area with his attacks. He kills 271 Zerglings in about 10 seconds, while only taking about half of his HP in damage. While I was getting annihilated, I noticed something interesting about Brack. He seems to be able to push my units aside to walk towards his target. Normally, melee units with a target out of range will go to a new target in range. This gets me thinking. Each time that Brack starts heading towards a unit, I grab everybody in front of him and run, while the remaining lings chase him around. This leads to a really confusing looking chase scene where Brack is following a Zergling, eventually gets bored, kills 20 lings in one shot, and then starts chasing a new Zergling. The strategy almost worked. Now I have no money and no Zerglings, but I'm not dead yet. As Brack cleaves through my expansion and overlords, I build up with my last resort. I hide all of the Zerglings that come out from Zergling Reconstitution in a corner until I get 40 of them, and then I dive. He dies while I have 6 supply remaining and 5 Guardians in my base. The Crucible is an incredibly easy mission. After walking past a no-build segment, the only thing I have to do is defend against enemy attacks for 25 minutes. The mission is supposed to be hard because I don't have access to Kerrigan, but that means that there's no challenge for this run. The early stages are the only bit that's a little bit tricky. Getting the balance right between making an economy and defending early rushes takes a few resets, but I manage. After I get my momentum going, the remainder of the mission is a breeze. A few Mutalisks and Guardians run into spore crawlers, and the primal ground forces are enveloped and crushed by my superior numbers. I wanted to thank a viewer named Hermit. He offered to count up the number of Zerglings that were used during each mission so that I could put them in graph form. Given we're about halfway through the campaign, I thought that this would be a great time to take a look at the numbers. Oh no. Reaching 4 minutes remaining on the Crucible took me 33 minutes of real time. Successfully beating the mission took me over 3.5 hours. There are no words to describe the onslaught of the Primal Zerg at the end of this mission. I tried everything. burrow ambushes, distraction evolution chambers, proxy hatches, kiting multiple Ultralisks at once, patrolling overlords, splitting my forces, combining my forces, hold position spore crawlers around the objective, sacrificing everything, again and again and again for those last precious seconds. Between all of the resets, it took me 29,367 Zerglings to find the answer. And the worst thing? I have no idea why I won. Most challenge roadblocks end with an epiphany on my side, an understanding of what must be done and then an execution of that strategy. The Crucible was nothing more than brute force until I got some good luck. After the Crucible comes Supreme, a no-build mission that doesn't even give you the option to control a Zergling. Now that Kerrigan is leveled up enough, I can finally access the easiest planet in the run. Wild Mutation is a niche ability, granting units in a small area damage absorption and attack speed for 10 seconds. Generally, it's regarded as inferior to Spawn Banelings or Mend, but it's a way to improve the power of my Zerglings without getting Kerrigan any kills. And it's the only way for 4 Zerglings to take out the Ursidon Matriarch. The Ursidon Matriarch at the beginning of Harvest of Screams is not difficult, it's just incredibly bulky. This means that the shielding provided from Wild Mutation is more than enough to keep my forces alive. After she falls, I get a base. The gimmick of Harvest of Screams is that all enemy forces freeze for a while every few minutes. This time is intended to be used to attack through the enemy base. However, fast cliff-walking Zerglings can just walk over to the objective and kill them during the freeze. With all the upgrades I've unlocked, Kaldir is just too easy. Shoot the Messenger is no exception. The enemy Protoss sends shuttles to 3 warp conduits on my side of the map. I use spore crawlers to shoot down the shuttles because unfortunately my Zerglings can't jump up and chew on their starships. The Protoss attack waves are fairly technologically advanced, but they're stifled by the fact that they don't get a whole lot of supporting units. Protoss armies don't fare well when they're not well rounded in their composition. I get bored, so I decide to try to kill the launch base to end the mission early. It turns out that High Templar Colossus Archon on defense is a bit much for the Zerglings, and even though I threw away my entire maxed army for nothing, I still complete the mission easily. To round out the trifecta of joke missions is Enemy Within. The first segment has me piloting an infested Ursidon around killing Protoss. I know this area can't be skipped because I've spent hours trying for speedrun reasons. After hatching as Niadra, gameplay goes as normal. Niadra can make an infinite number of Zerglings, meaning that all enemy groups will die eventually. Unfortunately, there's a point in this mission where Niadra must be used to kill a warp drive structure. There's no valid pathing for the Zerglings to get to this building, and there's no way to progress through the mission until it's down. This is the only point in the run where I can build Zerglings, but I can't use Zerglings to progress, and it does sting a little. The ending segment is timed, and this is where things get a bit more difficult. I decide to be cute, trying to use cliff jumping to kill this Templar on a ledge. It was a horrible idea. 2 Archons get pulled from the end of the mission, and they get real angry. Them and their buds find the perfect choke point and absolutely slaughter my forces. They hold the line for so long that the escape pods are launched, and I have to reload. Honestly, I was really impressed. The second time, I skip around the funny business, target down the pods, and give the Archons their comeuppance. After Kaldir, I can go to either Dominion Space or Skygear Station. Unfortunately, both of the space missions are not possible with only Zerglings. In the first mission, you only control a battlecruiser, and in the second mission, you're given 11 Zerglings to beat 16 Marines, 2 Medics, 5 Hellions, 4 Marauders, 2 Siege Tanks, 3 Firebats, 2 Goliaths, and a Thor, without Wild Mutation or any other buffs. Coming into this run, I was worried about Infested. Normally, the mission progression is simple. Capture infested Terran spawns, use the infested Terran as a shield to progress through the map, to capture more infested Terran spawns, and then defend your territory during the gas attacks. Normally, it's expected for many thousands of infested to die during the mission. Zergling can fill a similar role, but they're not free. After a mandatory no-build section, I relieve my infestors from duty, and with them my ability to capture more spawn points. I thought I was being cute when I realized that the 3 infested spawn points I start with are not technically mine, but an ally's. However, their unit count is so pathetic that they don't do anything throughout the mission. I have a new powerful passive ability, Malignant Creep. In addition to the bonus movement speed on Creep, my units now gain an attack speed bonus as well. Slipping my creep into enemy bases before the fights is now a powerful tactic, and makes babysitting the 1 or 2 creep tumors that I start each mission with incredibly important. There's one expansion on the map. After building up my forces, I take it out without much fanfare. The most annoying part is that right between the bases sits a Banshee. I need to hug the right side of the map to stay safe. Once my economy is going, I max out and start accumulating a large mineral bank. The northwest third of the map is a Terran fortress. This is one of the most heavily fortified positions in any Starcraft campaign. It is so well defended that I cannot fight it. It would take at least 4, maybe 5 or 6 maxed out Zergling armies to break it. This map has enough resources for 2 armies. Instead, I take my maxed out army and charge the objective. And it goes okay. Over 300 Zergling fall, but it did take the objective to half HP. As the map mines out, I know that I'll have no third wave. I kill all of my workers to increase the size of my second strike, and create a Zergling force of 400. My supply is nothing but Zergling. The second charge is brutal. Over 150 dead lings before I touch the objective. 391 die in 30 seconds. But those final 9 are all I need. The objective falls, and it's time to move inside the station. Surprisingly, the laboratory is much easier. Hand of Darkness is very middle of the road when it comes to difficulty. I must kill 8 hybrid before a countdown timer reaches 0. Each time I kill a hybrid, the remaining time increases. While the hybrid are strong, they're not that much to be worried about. They have an average attack, an area of effect knockback ability that deals decent damage, and eventually they get Psystorm. Each one can take out a sizable chunk of my Zergling, but they're less army killers and more army denters. There's a Terran base to my west and a small outpost to the north. Both have mineral lines. I decide to be greedy. Normally, taking out the western base is a pretty big endeavor. It's supposed to act as a thorn in my side as I focus on the hybrid. But one thing that Zergling do better than any other composition is start building up quickly. Between hybrid 2 and 3, I move in and clear out the base of defenders. After taking a quick break to eat the third hybrid, I return to clean up the buildings, and now I'm mining off of 3 bases. There was a Banshee valiantly defending the base, so I started some hatcheries and then cancelled one, using its remaining creep to burrow a spore crawler to defend my new domain. 3 mining bases brings my income to the point where I can simply hold down the Zergling button and rally my forces to whichever hybrid is next. Phantoms of the Void is a bit funky. After a no-build segment that contains no Zerglings, I move on to the mission proper. I must bring Stukov to 5 Xel'Naga temples and defend him while he channels for 1 minute. The Protoss defenders and hybrid attack waves try to stop me. The Protoss on this mission are very well upgraded and high-tech, but they suffer from the same problem all Protoss do in the campaign, a lack of unit volume. They never get up to a real death ball. To make up for it, the hybrid on the mission are absurd. With 2000 HP, high armor, splash damage attacks, and an area of effects slow and damage over time spell, they have some pretty crazy damage output. In order to engage the hybrid properly, I need to make sure that I take fights only on creep. And I lost my tumor before the first temple. After reaching the second temple, multiple hybrid attack. I can't kill the first before the second spawns, so I decide to drip feed Zerglings into each of them in order to minimize the splash damage taken. But the third temple is where problems really start to arise, air units. There's no justifying the use of spore crawlers here. By no means is this a base. Each attack wave sends a few air units that will steadily whittle down my forces, and I just have to take the damage. To make matters worse, I find a sneaky High Templar who manages to kill 90 of my Zerglings. After surviving each temple, I would run away from the remaining attackers. I just can't clean them up. I thought it was a cute way to preserve my forces, but at the final temple, I start to regret my decisions. Random scouts are strewn across the map and harass me. A leftover hybrid comes to say hi, and of course by now my main and natural bases are mined out, as is tradition. A few Void Rays defend the final objective. I have no way to contest these other than to send a large group of Zerglings to die as Stukov channels. The remaining Lings valiantly send wave after wave towards the hybrid to slow them down, and my supply plummets. But the temple is captured, and I move on to Core Hall. Kerrigan is now level 60, gaining one of her 3 ultimate abilities. I now have access to drop pods. It's really a shame that drop pods is a complete meme. The ability drops 40 primal Zerglings. This sounds great, except for the Zergling are objectively horrible. They don't gain the benefits of my chosen mutation or evolution strain. Statistically, they're identical to the Zerglings I start the game with. The only exception is that they're huge. Their hitboxes are significantly larger than the normal Zergling. If they're part of my fighting force, they take up so much room that my kills are actually slower. In testing, when I would send in a drop-podded Zergling army, it would actually take fights that I would win and turn them into losses. Normally the power of drop pods comes from the ability to toss them on top of the enemy during a fight, but I can't do that. The ability also drops 5 primal Hydralisks and 5 primal Roaches who need to be dealt with before I can utilize the Zerglings, meaning I have to pre-drop. It's the worst of all circumstances. And on top of it, any time the primal Zerglings get a kill, it counts as a kill for Kerrigan. It's really annoying. In the end, I found the best method to utilize my new Zerglings was to walk them through the enemy defenses, acting as a momentary damage sponge for my good Zerglings to close the gap. I'm not entirely sure the ability is actually worth using, but it does make Zerglings and it's a Zergling run, so I'll take what I can get. Core Hall is absurd. Right here are some of the most brutally punishing missions in the game, for any run, let alone Zerglings Only. A number of Terran forces are replaced with elite equivalents, gaining drastic increases of HP and damage output. Well, the last two missions are really hard. Planetfall is actually really easy. I have to clear the entire map of defenders and get 3 bases to do it with. Some bases take multiple waves to clear, and I have to encourage some battlecruisers to attack my base, but all in all, it's an easy kill. Every challenge run I do follows a few themes. There's always a mission that I thought would be hard and is actually pretty easy. There's always a mission that I thought would be hard and ends up being hard, like the Crucible. And then there's always a mission that I thought would be easy, and is a nightmare. In this case, I didn't think it'd be easy per se. Instead, I completely forgot that it existed until I reached Core Hall, and then played through Planetfall with a sense of impending dread, knowing that there was no easy way out of this. Welcome to Death from Above. The mission begins with a Dahaka only segment where I must destroy a power link. I make sure not to injure any of the Terran in the spirit of the run. Now I have a base, it's time to build up. The entire map is a well-defended Terran defensive line. This wouldn't be a problem if it weren't for the gimmick of the map, the Side Destroyer field. After 6 minutes, it powers on. The field does damage over time to anything inside of it. Zergling can survive here for about 10 seconds. It takes about 50 seconds for them to reach the objective. If this wasn't enough, the field slowly moves towards me, engulfing the entire map over time. To shut down the field, there's a power link. Primal Zerg units are immune to the Side Disruptor, so I gain control of Dahaka and some Primal Zerg. No Primal Zerglings though. The link is on an island, and I have no way to get Zerglings over to it. Fortunately, due to rule number 5, transportation units are allowed. Unfortunately, Overlord Drop and Nidus Worms don't actually exist in the campaign. If I want to avoid using Dahaka to clear, I'm gonna have to get creative, and I have some work to do. I head back to the Leviathan to talk to Abathur. I haven't completed any of the other evolution missions in the run, because once I have Raptorlings, I thought they were a waste of time, but now they have a use. Of course, none of the missions involve a single Zergling, not even the Baneling evolution mission, so if you want to be angry to me about this in the comments, feel free. After completing the Mutalisk evolution, I head back to Planetfall with the star of the show, the Viper. The Viper's abduct ability is generally used to pull high-value enemy targets into your army, but today I'm using it as an incredibly convoluted taxi service. I rush out a Viper and pull 2 drones over to the island, and then build some hatcheries. This is the last that I'll be using the Viper, though I do keep it alive to waste supply in order to atone for my non-Zergling sins. I have a limited time to produce Zerglings for this segment, not nearly enough to kill the power link. I need Primal Zerglings, but I can't abduct Kerrigan over to the island because heroic units are immune. I kill both of my hatcheries in my main base, and then I kill Kerrigan. Now she's going to respawn at the hatchery on the island and can use drop pods to help. This was a really bad idea, and I died. The strategy might have been a bit too bold. After fiddling with Kerrigan's position a bit, I found this nook where most of the drop pods land on the island. I send waves of raptors to cliff jump onto the defensive tanks, eliminating them. Now come the drop pods. There is no chance these Primal Zerglings can beat the enemies. I dive the objective instead. They take it to half HP, and now I wait. Drop pod's cooldown is slightly over 4 minutes, and the destroyer field is getting uncomfortably close. I now have to dive into the field to engage enemy attacks. If the next set of drop pods don't kill the link, I'm dead. But today, fortune favored me, and the link does go down. Thankfully, the final power link is significantly easier. Kerrigan can jump across the gap to it, and the lack of siege tanks means that the Primal Zerglings easily take it down. Now all that remains is the final objective. I try to attack the defenders normally. I make it to the second of 3 defensive positions and am cleaned up. And I'm mined out. I can't fight this. I launch a raid straight towards the Disruptor and get slaughtered. I only have enough money for a single army, so I reload a few times to get the attack just right. In the end, I decide to give up my drones for a perfectly maxed army, and this, in addition to fixing some pathing issues, was the nudge that I needed, and the boys managed to take out the Disruptor. I had legitimately thought that the Reckoning was impossible. This is where Mengsk pulls out all of the stops, and it feels like each of them is specifically designed to slaughter Zerglings. First are the Duskwings, an elite Banshee variant that also has the upgrades from the Wings of Liberty campaign, allowing them to deal their attack damage in a line. Because of the 25% damage boost on Brutal, the Duskwing one-shots Lings in that line. A single Duskwing guarding the expansion means that I can't attempt to take it until the 12-minute mark in the game. I'm going to be economically stagnated for a long time. The Elite Reaper Hellion attack waves are equally as powerful. The Reapers also can kill my Zerglings in a single hit. This means that small pokes from the enemy can take down 40 or more of my supply without a problem. Jim's base is constantly under threat by the enemy. If he falls, the mission ends. Jim's brain-dead nature means that I have to sacrifice my entire army to buffer for him as he slowly kills the incoming air units. As soon as I secure the base, the enemy gets pissed and starts constantly sending attack waves against it. Each small outpost on the map creates attack waves at increasing frequency. In order to progress, I have to start crippling them. After I rescue Jim, again. The first target is the starport outpost. I need to cripple them before they start sending air waves that are more complicated than landed Vikings. I can't kill a majority of the defenders, instead relying on the massive damage output of Zerglings to clear the base from under them. Initially, I had wanted to ignore the rescuable allies on the map. Each sends a fairly big attack wave when rescued, and then a fairly useless trickle after that. After over 6 hours of testing, I confirm that this mission cannot be done without them. But I don't rescue them yet. The final push against Jim comes with the Odin, but it retains the Thor AI that prioritizes air units after ground ones. This lets my Zerglings get into position really easily. Now that Jim is no longer under threat, he starts to get aggressive. The attacks he sends are not great, but they do have the ability to hit air. I can't control where Jim goes, but just like Zerglings themselves, I employ the buddy system and follow him around. Turns out, instead of clearing the third base like I wanted to, we're going to rescue Stukov and his forces first. Thanks, Jim. With my main base mining out, I push for the map's final minerals in the center. The factories there push out some strong defenders, but they launched an attack wave against me right before I hit them, lessening their numbers. Next up is the Reaper Hellion base to the right. Not only does it send incredible attack waves, but it's defended by a small choke point with well-positioned siege tanks, ghosts that snipe my forces, and a planetary fortress. I whittle down a majority of the base and then pull back. In order to make the final push against Mengsk work, I need the full force of my allies. The entrance to the final base is so well defended that I mined out the map multiple times in testing trying to figure it out. I wait for Jim to attack, break Zagara loose, and time it out so that Dahaka's forces are freed and join at about the same time. With a drop pod launch, Zagara's forces, Dahaka's primal, a maxed army of Zerglings, and Jim striking the flank, we clear about a quarter of the base. Mengsk knows how to rebuild his forces, and now I'm mining on one base. Because my forces are drained, I utilize good old burrow ambushes to take fights effectively. Keeping pressure on the southern entrance is my goal. If I can stop Mengsk from refortifying the area, maybe Jim can come in and give me enough support that we can find some success. Jim is not interested in this plan, and repeatedly attacks the north. After another failed push, I realize I need to retool my strategy. The next time that Jim attacks, instead of supporting him against the army, I use him as bait. My forces swarm over Mengsk's production facilities, and I take down every barracks, factory, and all but one starport. I know Mengsk can rebuild, but this will delay him for at least 60 seconds. And then I learn that Mengsk is Bronze League. Instead of sending multiple SCVs to rebuild his infrastructure, the AI queues one SCV to rebuild every production structure alone. I dive his unfinished production repeatedly, eventually coming face to face with a Mengsk who only has a few air units remaining and no ability to rebuild. I take my shot to dive the final planetary fortresses and siege tanks, his final defenders, and get cleaned up again. It's not going to be that easy. After gathering my forces another time, over an hour into this final mission, all of the defenders have been cleared out, and all that remains is the palace. And then Mengsk sends in drop pods and clears me out again. Come on, dude. One final time, I collect my forces, push through the final defenders, and topple the palace with Zerglings Only.